Good evening, Sangha. I want to say thank you so much for choosing to spend this part of your evening with us. Um, Delighted to have you here. And as was said, we're going to be starting with a period of silent practice. Just to say a little bit about myself. Um, as I get older, it just all the things seem to fall away. I think the most important thing is I'm 72 years old. I'm a mother and a grandmother. I was a midwife in the Bay Area for over 2 decades. And that means I got to work with women from over 80 countries and their families. And I have a deep, deep love for the embodied work of birth giving, whatever gender is involved, and for the task of parenting and raising families and caring for the next generation. And you don't have to have given birth to do that. Every one of us is a model, a mentor, and potentially an exemplar for the next generation. So I'm glad that you're all here and that we're taking part in this great adventure called life, going through the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And in terms of our practice, some of you have been practicing for 3 or 4 decades. Some of you are fairly new. For many of us, we learned about practice by focusing on the breath. The object of mindfulness is to bring us into the present moment. And so that moment may be through chanting, through dancing, through movement, through silence, through sitting, lying, or standing. The Buddha taught that we could meditate in any of those positions. So for right now, find a position that is relatively comfortable for your particular body and the way that your bones and your body is and are, the way that you work with ability and disability. If you have had problems with the throat, medical issues, trauma issues, breathing may not be the best focal point or anchor for you. For some of us, while we do focus on the breath, a hand over the chest or the belly brings us more awareness of the breath. For some of us, placing the hands and being mindful of the weight of the hands on the thighs, the sits bones on the chair, the cushion, the length of the body lying down are also anchor points. And finally, or not so finally, there is sound, the rise and fall of sound, or the soft gaze 6 inches or so in front of the body. Pick one of those and stay with it through this meditative practice. The purpose of the anchor is to bring you into the here and now, into the present moment where our liberation, our freedom, and peace, regardless of the state of the body, is. So let's pick our focal point and we'll begin. I invite you to soften the gaze. You don't have to close the eyes if that's not comfortable for you. Find your anchor point and we begin. As we practice, anxieties may arise, distractions, feelings, emotions, regrets, anticipations. They will rise from the mind like fish jumping out of the water. Don't resist them. Let them rise and fall back and bring your attention back to your anchor point. If you are practicing with chronic pain, if it helps to focus on the site of the body in which you're having pain, then let that be your anchor point. If that is not helpful, choose another. As we come to the end of the silent practice, I invite you to place a hand over the heart. Your heart has been beating since before you were born, and it will continue to beat for the rest of your life. Take a moment and feel gratitude for the heart. And think now about your mind, all the information that comes in and that you process, all the ways of knowing and apprehending the world. Feel the power of the mind, its ability to discern, to know, and to regulate. And take a moment to feel gratitude for the mind. And maybe putting a hand on the belly or not, think of this body, whatever its abilities or disabilities are. This is the body that woke you up this morning. This is the body that houses your spirit. Take a moment and be grateful for the body. So I want to welcome everybody back. There may be some people still getting back to the room, but welcome. I'm thinking about playing a video, but I'm going to wait a bit and see how we go and how our breakouts go. I don't know about you, but it's been a kind of stressful couple of weeks for me. I think as a survivor of various types of trauma and as a person of color and a visibly Black person in the USA, I found the events of January 6th to be quite upsetting and very retriggering. I was 16 the first time I went to Washington, D.C., and I was there for a high school state conference, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee conference. And DC police literally were dragging freedom riders off the buses and beating them. And my friend Ardella and I, who was the chairperson of our New York City state chapter, could only stand and witness. We couldn't get to the people. We couldn't protect them. We couldn't even demonstrate. And I remember looking at her and saying, we will never forget this. And understanding that sometimes the most you can do is be a witness to what is happening. You can utter protest, but you might not be able to stop it, whatever is happening. I've been thinking too about the Buddha and his title as the Awakened One. And I think that we're all in a moment where we're waking up. We're waking up to the kind of injustice that has been so pervasive. We've known it's there as people of color, whether we are new immigrants or whether we and our families have been here for generations, or whether we and our peoples have lived here for as long as the grass has grown, the sky has been blue, and the mountains have existed. Ever since the arrival of the colonizers, it has been hard. And so the events of the 6th were not necessarily new, but they were a reminder of how real and present things are, and how it is not just people of color who are targeted. It is anyone whom patriarchy, white supremacy, homophobia, ableism, all the isms that oppress us, nativism, targets. We are all at risk. All of us who are struggling to make this place a home for all of the people who live here. I want to begin by just acknowledging the land that I'm on. I live in Oakland, as is the physical center for East Bay Meditation Center. And it is Wichin, the home of the Ohlone people, the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone. If you live in San Francisco, it's Ramatush, the home of the Ohlone people on that side of the bay. And I want us to just for a moment, just take a breath and think about the people who have been here forever, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I want to acknowledge a great deal of gratitude for their resilience, for the fact that they are still present, that they and their cultural ways and their language and their lands are experiencing a resurgence. We don't have a formal relationship at East Bay Meditation Center yet with the local Ohlone people, but there is a Sogoretea land trust. And someone will put the name Sogoretea in the chat. And if you want to read a little bit about them, you can find out by looking at that. We are very grateful to be here on their lands. And I like to say that if a land is beautiful, it is because of the long ago people who lived here. It is beautiful because of the pacts they made with the elements, the animal powers, with the plant people, with the controlled burns that made the land beautiful and that kept it fertile. And so I want to just acknowledge my gratitude to the Ohlone people and encourage you. You may not know the names of the people who are the indigenous inhabitants of the land that you now reside on, but I encourage you to find out and see if there is a way that you can make connection, whether that connection is in prayer or in practice. So, as I began, I felt a lot of anxiety over the last week. I didn't know if we were going to experience war again in this country. Someone I was speaking to said, you know, Arisika, they're still fighting the Civil War. And I think seeing the Confederate flag being carried through the halls of Congress was a sign. Some people are still fighting the Civil War. And those times, the antebellum times in the South, were not a good time for people of color. They were especially not good for African Americans, but they were not good for Native Americans. And they were not good for many immigrants. The Constitution, as it was originally written, only applied to free, white, property-owning men, and that left a lot of people out. So there's been suffering in the world, and the Buddha said that he taught one thing and one thing only: suffering and the end of suffering. And certainly, if you've had anxiety, if you've had fear, if you've had doubt, if you've had concerns for your safety or the safety of those you love, if you've had concerns about the pandemic, which is hitting the communities of people of color so much harder than the dominant culture, sometimes because of access, sometimes because of the stress of racism that makes us sick, that breaks down our immune system sooner. If you're dealing with the pandemic and you're a person of color, it's been a hard time also. And we're in the midst of climate change. We're in perhaps the 6th mass extinction. It's not an easy time for other than human species. And many of the species that we have learned, that we know have great intelligence, may be going. You know, Chief Seattle, in a speech once said that if all the animals were gone, then the human beings would suffer from great loneliness, longing. Alice Walker titled a book of poetry she wrote, "Horses Make a Landscape More Beautiful." We are in truth kin to all of the natural world. We know that we cannot survive without oxygen. And we know also that oxygen is the gift of the plant people. They take in our carbon dioxide, and we take in the oxygen that they produce. And we are not making a habitat for the trees. We're not making a habitat for our animal kin. You know, our plants, the plants that we eat, are pollinated by bees. And it's very difficult to be a bee now. It's difficult for so many animals. And now that we're in the pandemic, some people are talking about the anthropause and the way that more and more people, more and more of our animal kin, the sentient folk that live amongst us and in the spaces that we have left them, that many of them are coming out more. That, you know, in the cities, there are more deer, there are more mountain sightings of mountain lions, there are more bears, there are more dolphins in the bay, there are more whales. It's quieter in the ocean. And that's a good thing for the whale people. It's a good thing for many of the peoples who live in the oceans and cannot leave it. So I want us to think for a moment about all the species that bring beauty into our lives, all the species that help sustain our lives, all the beings that are our kin. Whether we eat meat or vegetables, we take life to survive. So let's just pause for a moment and maybe place a hand over the heart, a hand over the belly, and just think for a moment of some member of the plant world or the animal world that is bringing you joy in these times. You may be alone, but have an animal companion, someone that lessens your anxiety, that offers you unconditional love, whether you're healthy or unhealthy, whether you're angry or sad. Maybe a bird or the chirping of birds in the morning. Everything has its place, even the ants. I'm very aware of the ants because they're more out in the rain. And they pick up all the debris and litter that we leave. I'm very grateful to the ant people. So let's just offer prayers for the well-being, affirmations for the well-being of our animal kin. Let's offer prayers for the well-being of the tree people and the mountains, the standing stones. It is the mountains that gather the clouds sometimes, that help with rain and moisture. And water and moisture are life-giving for the people. Let your consciousness just feel for a moment the web of life in which you are embedded. Breathe in, breathe out. And let's have our heart consciousness expand to the plants, the animals, the elements, the standing people, the rocks, the valleys, the canyons. Let's just for a moment feel the earth. Earth is the mother at whose breast we suck always. And let's feel our gratitude in this moment. I began by speaking about anxiety, worry. And one of the things that the Buddha taught was to take refuge in the present moment. All forms of mindfulness call us into the here and now. And I had been, for many years, not the most diligent meditators. And as I grew older, two things occurred. One, I realized that oppression might not end in my lifetime. And second, I had an experience in meditation. It wasn't one of those big, glorious moments when, like the heavens open up or anything like that. But I suddenly realized in the moment of feeling my breath moving in and out, I wasn't hot, I wasn't cold, I wasn't angry, I wasn't worried. I simply was. And in that moment, I knew peace. And I began to think more. It set me out on a journey because certainly war, caste prejudice, racial prejudice, othering of other peoples, hatred, violence, greed, all these are not new phenomena. They occurred in the Buddhist time, even as they occur today. And as we all know, tomorrow, what will happen tomorrow? We don't know. We don't know if the earth will suddenly shrug and that long overdue earthquake will happen in California. We don't know what is going to happen in terms of the pandemic. I read recently that there are now hundreds of strains of the virus that they're isolating, and they don't know how different they are. Some of us are wondering, should we take the vaccine if it's offered? Should we not take the vaccine? As a long-term healthcare worker, I know that often the first iteration of any drug is not the same that is going to be offered 10 years down the line. We'll learn a lot more as people take this vaccine. And we know that the violent white supremacy, the misogyny that has been not only unleashed, but encouraged throughout the Trump era is not going away. It's with us. It has been with us ever since the beginning of settler colonialism in this country. It has been with us ever since the mid-Atlantic slave trade. It has been with us since the institution of slavery, which goes back thousands and thousands of years. All these things, the inhumanity, the difficult ways that we treat one another, they have been with us, and they will probably be with us for at least several more decades. I say prayers that my granddaughter or my granddaughter's grandchildren will live in an era of peace, will know an end to racism. It won't end death, disease, disability, or change in the body. But if oppression ended, life, we could all exhale. Let's for a minute, just take a breath in. And think about what would it mean if you didn't have to experience oppression. Again, the world wouldn't be perfect. We'd still struggle. We'd still have interpersonal drama. We'd still sometimes fall in love with the wrong person who wasn't in love with us. All those things are part of life. But what a weight off our shoulders, our backs, our hearts, our livers. What would it be like if oppression ended? What radical forms of creativity would emerge? What would it like if we could walk in our gender identity safe, seen, and honored? What if the colors of our skin meant as much as the color of a cat's skin? I remember once being up in the park at Grizzly Peak and seeing a whole bunch of feral cats. They were playing together. They were black and white and spotted and calico. And it was so clear that their color of their fur meant nothing to them. They had other ways of knowing how they smell, maybe maleness and femaleness. There are ways, I'm sure, that I'm not a cat. There are ways, I'm sure, that they knew each other, but their color of their fur was not meaningful to them. What would it be like if we lived in a world in which the color of our skin was as meaningful as the diversity of flowers in a garden, a multi-flowered garden? That's the world we want to take birth in. And every one of us who is here, according to some beliefs, chose to be born in these times. We have medicine for these times. We have gifts to share in these times. And we are here to help each other get through. Some of you have heard me talk before, and I am a great proponent of the notion of tend and befriend. Most of us know about the fear, flight, and fear response. And that response was the response to stress or trauma. The original experiments were carried out on male rats. And about 20 years ago, some female researchers replicated the experiments, and they replicated them with female rats. And after the administration of a stressor, I'm not sure if it was an electric shock, I'm not sure what it was, and I cannot, unfortunately, say that the rats were humanely treated. But what the researchers noted was that after the initial shock wore off, the female rats gathered the young together and licked and groomed them. They touched them. And they made it safe for them. And I believe that one of the human responses to trauma is to gather together in families, in communities, and love each other, care for one another. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and we many of us have gone weeks or months without touch. And I want to, in this moment, you don't have to be witnessed, but I'm going to encourage you to take your hands and just touch your cheeks and just feel your cheeks. Your skin may be soft or firm. It may be bristly with hair. It may be smooth. It may be wrinkled. but it's your skin. It's the skin you were born into and the skin you inhabit now. It's not your baby skin. It's changed, but it's yours. And it is worthy of touch and love and gentleness and tenderness. And now, just look at your hands and just stroke them for a moment. Look at your skin. Look at the length of your fingers. This is the gift of your ancestors, the lineage that has passed down to you. Their ancestors may or may not be related to your parents, but this is the skin, this hand, this body. And you may also, some of you want to touch your hair. I'm going to touch my braid, which is very long. I was going to cut my hair and then COVID happened. So I'm waiting. But you might touch your hair, which is also the gift of your ancestors. When Jack Kornfield, who was my first Buddhist teacher, taught, he often began by saying, "O nobly born." And it is a way that the Buddha, in a culture that was so full of caste and gradation, there's not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, there are dozens of caste. And Indians in Hindu society were very aware of caste gradations. And even now in the US, some Indians say people are not comfortable till they know your caste. And when the Buddha addressed all his followers, "O nobly born," he was calling out the inherent nobility of every human being, regardless of ability or disability, regardless of race or size, regardless of able-bodiedness, regardless of all the divisions. So in this moment, you were born. You have a body. You are worthy. You are wonderful. You are seen. Seen by your community. Seen by spirit. You are worthy. And you are here. So in recognition of the energy and the power and the love that has been raised in this gathering, I dedicate and we dedicate the merit of our practice tonight to all beings who are suffering, to all beings in need of liberation, to all beings in need of peace. May we be one people, one species, one planet, living in balance and harmony. And may it be soon. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for the practice. May you come again to our next session or some next session. Thank you for joining us.